Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a topic many people wonder about, prostate enlargement, or BPH.
Benign prostatic hyperplasia. It's common, and the why behind it is fascinating.
Exactly. And that's our mission for this deep dive, really getting to the core of why it happens.
We'll be looking at the key hormones involved, definitely.
And also some, well, maybe surprising lifestyle factors. We want to show you how things like stress, maybe even your daily caffeine.
Yeah, how they could be more connected than you might think.
We've got some great source material, some text explaining the physiology.
And a diagram, too, which really helps map out these connections.
Right. So let's dive in. The sources seem to point towards a kind of hormonal chain reaction.
That's a good way to put it. And interestingly, it all seems to kick off with cholesterol.
Cholesterol. Okay, not just about heart health then.
No, not at all. It's the basic building block. Our bodies take cholesterol and convert it into something called pregnenolone.
Pregnenolone, like a master hormone.
Sort of, yeah. It's a precursor. From there, it can go down a couple of main paths. It can become progesterone,
Okay.
or it can become cortisol.
Cortisol, the stress hormone we hear so much about. But progesterone, what's its main role here, according to the sources?
Well, a key job for progesterone is keeping estrogen levels in check, sort of balancing them out.
Like a hormonal seesaw. Progesterone on one side, estrogen on the other.
That's a pretty good analogy, yeah. You need that balance. Too much tilt towards estrogen isn't ideal.
And this is where modern life comes in. The sources suggest that our lifestyle can really push that seesaw.
Exactly. It mainly does this by increasing cortisol. The sources highlight two main ways our cortisol gets ramped up.
Okay, so let's break that down. How does cortisol increase?
Well, the first way is pretty direct stimulation of the adrenal glands.
The glands that actually make the cortisol.
Right. And things like caffeine, coffee, tea, cola, those energy drinks, they can directly signal those glands to produce more.
Wow, okay. What else triggers them directly?
Inflammation is another big one. This could be, your body fighting an infection or healing from an injury.
Or even intense exercise.
Yeah, strenuous exercise can cause temporary inflammation. Also, poor diet, maybe food combinations causing gut inflammation. All those signals can tell the adrenals, okay, make more cortisol.
Got it. So direct triggers like caffeine and inflammation. What's the other pathway? Something about the HPA axis.
Yeah, the HPA axis, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. Think of it like the body's central stress command center.
Okay.
When you experience stress, maybe it's psychological stress, mental overload, just feeling constantly rushed.
Which sounds like a lot of modern life.
It really does.
Yeah.
So this HPA axis gets activated, and it sends signals down the chain to the adrenal glands, telling them to pump out cortisol.
So whether it's direct stimulation or via this HPA axis, the end result is more cortisol.
Right. And here's where that chain reaction you mentioned really gets going. Elevated cortisol isn't just there. It actively changes other hormone levels.
How so? What's the first domino to fall?
Well, remember pregnenolone, that precursor. When the body needs lots of cortisol, it starts diverting pregnenolone away from making progesterone.
So it steals the building blocks.
Kind of, yeah. It prioritizes cortisol production. So, step one, less progesterone is being made.
Yeah.
But then there's a sort of double whammy. Existing progesterone can also be converted into cortisol.
Seriously. So you make less, and then you lose some of what you already have.
Exactly. Both pathways lead to lower progesterone levels overall.
And we said progesterone helps keep estrogen in check. So if progesterone drops...
Estrogen levels tend to rise, relatively speaking. The balance shifts.
But doesn't the body try to compensate somehow? Doesn't it affect testosterone too?
It does. With estrogen potentially rising, the body tries to manage things. One mechanism involves an enzyme called aromatase.
Aromatase, okay.
Aromatase converts testosterone into estrogen, so in this situation, more testosterone might get converted, lowering free testosterone levels.
Right. And I think the sources also mentioned cortisol itself has an effect.
Yes, good point. High cortisol can also directly suppress the body's production of testosterone, so it's hitting testosterone from a couple of angles.
Okay, let's recap this cascade. Stress or inflammation happens. That pushes cortisol up.
Right.
Cortisol then lowers progesterone, partly by using up pregnenolone and partly by converting existing progesterone.
Correct.
Lower progesterone lets estrogen rise. And cortisol also suppresses testosterone, plus more testosterone gets converted to estrogen.
You've got it. But there's one more piece from the adrenal glands, DHEA.
DHEA. How does that fit in?
When the adrenals are pumping out cortisol, they often produce more DHEA as well. Now, DHEA can be converted into testosterone.
Oh, okay. So maybe that helps buffer the low testosterone.
You'd think so, but remember, we just said the enzyme aromatase is likely more active, converting testosterone to estrogen.
Ah, right. So even if you make a bit more testosterone via DHEA.
A good chunk of it might just end up feeding into those already elevated estrogen levels. It doesn't necessarily solve the low testosterone issue.
Wow, okay. So this whole hormonal shift is happening upstream. How does this then connect downstream to the prostate itself? The sources mentioned DHT.
Yes, dihydrotestosterone, or DHT. This hormonal imbalance, starting with high cortisol, has effects that lead us there. For instance, high cortisol can lead to increased blood sugar levels.
Right, and that means more insulin.
Often, yes. More insulin production, and that can encourage fat storage.
Okay, fat storage. Why is that relevant here?
Because fat cells produce an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase. More fat cells can mean more of this enzyme.
And 5-alpha reductase. That's the key link to DHT, isn't it?
Exactly. 5-alpha reductase is the enzyme that converts testosterone into DHT.
And DHT is like a much more potent form of testosterone, at least in certain tissues like the prostate.
Very much so. It binds much more strongly to the androgen receptors on prostate cells.
So what does DHT actually do to the prostate once it binds to those receptors?
It essentially tells the prostate cells to grow and multiply. The sources detail a few ways it does this. Stimulating those androgen receptors is the main one. It also activates something called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1.
What does IGF-1 do?
It tends to reduce programmed cell death, apoptosis, so cells stick around longer.
Right, so growth signals plus cells living longer.
And there's more. DHT also increases EGF epidermal growth factor, which directly promotes cell proliferation, making new cells.
Okay.
And finally, it encourages angiogenesis, the formation of new blood vessels within the prostate, which helps supply the growing tissue.
So DHT is really pushing prostate growth from multiple angles.
Definitely seems to be a major player according to this model.
But it's not just DHT, is it? The sources also brought up estrogen again, and another hormone, prolactin.
Correct. They're also part of the picture. The elevated estrogen we discussed earlier doesn't just sit there. It can stimulate the production of prolactin.
How does estrogen boost prolactin?
Two main ways mentioned. First, estrogen can act directly on the pituitary glands, specifically on estrogen receptors there, called ER-alpha, telling it to release more prolactin.
Okay, direct stimulation.
Second, estrogen messes with dopamine. Dopamine normally acts like a brake, inhibiting prolactin release.
Right.
Estrogen seems to reduce the enzyme needed to make dopamine, tyrosine hydroxylase, and also speeds up dopamine's breakdown or reuptake. So, less brake means more prolactin.
So higher estrogen leads to higher prolactin. How do these two, along with DHT, impact the prostate then?
Well, it seems to be a combined effect. Increased prolactin, working together with the high estrogen and DHT, can further stimulate the prostate gland.
How? Through the same receptors?
Yes, they appear to act on both the androgen receptors and the estrogen receptors, ER-alpha, in the prostate tissue. It's like more voices shouting, "Grow!"
And does estrogen have its own direct effect too?
It seems so. The sources indicate estrogen itself can directly stimulate those ER-alpha receptors in the prostate, contributing to cell proliferation and the overall enlargement.
It's just layer upon layer of connections. It's quite complex.
It really is, and it doesn't stop there. The sources even draw a link to our mental and emotional state, specifically through dopamine.
Dopamine, again, we just mentioned it in relation to prolactin.
Exactly. And the sources point out that various long-term mental and emotional states can actually lower dopamine levels in the brain.
Like what kind of states?
Things like chronic stress, especially social stress or burnout. Also, depression, particularly the type where you lose pleasure in things, and hedonia,
Okay.
anxiety, chronic fear, feelings of learned helplessness, even things like loneliness or social isolation.
Wow, that's a broad list. Anything else?
Yeah, lack of novelty or chronic boredom, unresolved grief or emotional suppression, ongoing sleep deprivation, low self-worth, or feelings of hopelessness. Even withdrawal from addictions can lower dopamine.
That covers a lot of challenging human experiences.
Yes.
So how does lower dopamine from these states tie back to the prostate?
It's that prolactin connection again. Remember, dopamine inhibits prolactin.
Right, removes the brake.
So if these mental or emotional factors are persistently lowering your dopamine levels, that can lead to increased prolactin.
Which then adds to the stimulation of the prostate, alongside the high estrogen and DHT we already discussed.
Precisely. It suggests our mental well-being through these neurochemical pathways can potentially exacerbate these physical processes in the prostate.
That's actually quite profound. The link between, say, feeling isolated and a physical change of the prostate gland via dopamine and prolactin.
It really underscores how interconnected mind and body are.
So let's try and synthesize all this. We've traced this intricate web, starting from cholesterol, influenced by stress, caffeine, inflammation,
Hmm.
leading to shifts in cortisol, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, DHEA,
Yeah.
which then affects DHT production via fat cells and 5-alpha reductase.
Yeah.
And then DHT, estrogen, and prolactin, which itself can be influenced by dopamine levels tied to our mental state, all converge to stimulate prostate growth.
That's a great summary of the pathways described in the sources.
Given all that, the source material basically poses a big question, doesn't it?
It does. It asks, could prostate enlargement, BPH, be largely a consequence of our modern lifestyle?
Driven by factors like chronic stress, maybe diets leading to inflammation, high caffeine intake, things that are pretty common today.
Based on this intricate hormonal interplay we've just walked through, the information presented makes a strong case for that possibility. It suggests these lifestyle factors can significantly disrupt hormonal balance in ways that directly contribute.
So recapping this deep dive for everyone listening, we've seen this really complex dance of hormones
Definitely complex.
and how significantly things like stress and our daily choices might influence that dance, impacting prostate health through pathways involving cortisol, progesterone, estrogen, DHT, and even prolactin.
Yeah, and what I find particularly striking are those perhaps unexpected links the sources reveal.
Mm.
Like the connection between mental well-being dopamine levels and this physical condition.
It really highlights that everything's connected, doesn't it?
It really does. Nothing happens in isolation in the body.
Absolutely. So for you, our listener, hopefully this exploration has shed some light on the many factors potentially at play.
Hmm.
Perhaps it gives you pause to think about your own lifestyle, your stress levels, and how they might be influencing your hormonal balance and, well, your overall health.
It's definitely food for thought, maybe exploring stress management, looking closely at diet, or even getting a better understanding of your own individual hormonal profile.
Right. Those could be really valuable next steps, taking a proactive approach based on this kind of understanding.
It's all about connecting the dots for your own health.